Hello, everybody. Today I would like to invoke the spirit of Halloween by not review. I should say I'm going to be reading a story from Scary Stories, a tribute to terror. I did a review of this book a while back. I also did a comparison between this and the original books. So if you want to see that, there you go. They're on the playlist. But today I wanted to read you my favorite story from the book, and it's probably one of the longer ones. And this is called Down in the Park. And that's why I put a park. That's the main image here. So I'm going to be reading this. If you like short stories, you may like this. And it is, I don't know, I just really like this story. And at the end, after I'm finished, I will be doing a short review. And that'll be that. So I hope you enjoy this. Okay, Down in the Park. On a hot Sunday in July, brothers Curtis and Scott were spending the afternoon at the park with their friends Danielle and Aja. "Let's go to the playground," suggested the girls, who were sisters. Curtis and Scott nodded in agreement, and the four headed out along the path through the huge fields of grass. The playground was infamous. It was a 3-story cement jumble of platforms, catwalks, and spiraling metal slides that would burn children if the sun shined on them for too long. At the base of this concrete fortress was a kind of dungeon of dark tunnels that was like a basement below the upper level. It was all quite old, and the kind of thing that would probably be torn down one day and replaced with something safer. After playfully running to the entrance of the dungeon, the children went through a small arched hole that led into the little maze of passageways. Inside, it was cool and dark and smelled of sand and urine. No one was ever really bothered by this. It was simply part of the experience. They proceeded on hands and knees through the sand, as the ceiling was low. The children had crawled through the tunnels so many times that they memorized every inch and could have done it blindfolded. So when they reached the next corner, everyone was completely stunned by what they saw and stopped dead in their tracks. Something was different. There seemed to be a turn where there had not been one before. The children stared in confusion down the new tunnel. "Wait, this wasn't here last time," exclaimed Curtis. Danielle shook her head. "No way." "It wasn't?" Scott was unsure. "I told you, no way," Danielle replied. "They changed it, or something." "How could they change it?" asked Aja. "It's made of concrete. You can't just change it." "You guys are nuts." They paused, trying to process this puzzling predicament. For several moments, the only sounds came from other children shouting and running on the floors above them. After a while, Aja repeated her statement. "You guys are crazy." She proceeded on hands and knees down the new tunnel. The others followed. Perhaps they were mistaken. Somehow. As they moved through the passageway, the children felt a sudden prickling or tingling on their skin, and their hair stood up. Then, just as quickly, the sensations were gone. The light in the tunnel brightened a bit as the children rounded a turn and unexpectedly emerged from the structure, exactly where they had entered it, which didn't make sense. Somewhere along the way, the sounds of the playground had faded, and everything appeared darker than before, as though the sun had gone behind thick clouds. The group stood up and stood in their surroundings. There were no longer any children, and the park was gray, covered in a thick, eerie fog. Where there had been once a sun above, there was now a gigantic moon. The four gazed about in disbelief and stared at each other. Aja was the first to speak. "What the heck? What happened to all the people?" Danielle joined her. "And the sun, wasn't it daytime?" "What's going on?" said Curtis. "How could it get dark so fast?" Scott looked around in confusion. Then he pointed to the expanse of grass in the far distance where there had just moments before been several groups of people. They all left. The preteens pivoted around, scanning the fields, the hills, the pavilions, the playground. There was not a soul to be seen, and it was eerily quiet. The people went home, said Scott, maybe because the weather changed. Asia shook her head. No, that's crazy. Even if they all ran as fast as they could to hide while we were inside, we would still be able to see somebody around. Curtis couldn't understand it. We could hear them when we were inside. They were all over the place, but then the sounds just stopped. Something weird is going on. Everyone disappeared. Yeah, right. Aja chuckled. There were other kids around. They couldn't have gone very far. The girl ran off to the other side of the playground and was behind the cement structure. The others followed. She was expecting to see someone, anyone, but there was nobody anywhere. I don't understand, she said. There were a ton of kids a second ago. Where is everybody? A breeze swept eerily through the playground. The group could do nothing but stare in every direction. Then, from around the corner, came a rhythmic creaking sound. Guys, look. Curtis was now pointing to the swing set. The swings were motionless, all except one, which was vigorously swinging back and forth. They expected to see some kid who had just jumped off, but there was no one there. The four watched in shock as the swing just kept going. It didn't slow or stop. It was as something invisible was moving it. The sight of it caused him to take several steps back. Scott began to cry. Curtis, what's happening? Where are Mom and Dad? The children hadn't even noticed that they were huddled together in fear. There was only one place to go now, back down the path toward the opposite end of the enormous park. In the distance was the softball building. This was a green, circular structure made up of bleachers and a scorekeeper's room at the very top, which overlooked the 4 playing fields surrounding it. They knew that their parents should be there, playing volleyball on the grass nearby. They would be able to explain everything, right? After a quick glimpse at each other, the 4 took off running back down the path toward the softball building. But when they came around the corner, the big field of grass next to the structure came into view. But grass was all there was. The adults were not there. No one was there. And neither were the volleyball net, the lawn chairs, the coolers, with their last names stenciled on top. The place was deserted. Scott fell to his knees. Danielle just froze. Curtis looked to Aja, who, at 12, was the oldest. Why would they leave? He asked her, in tears, almost. Aja began rationalizing. There must be a good explanation, she said, trying to keep calm in front of the younger kids. We just have to find somebody. Let's head to the road and wave down a car. Curtis could see from the corner of his eye, that the parking lot was now empty. He looked away quickly, unwilling to process this. Let's go in there first, he said, motioning to the big green building. We were just at the snack bar. There must be people there. Everyone gazed toward the scorekeeper's lookout. At the top, they couldn't see anyone inside. It all seemed somewhat dirtier than before. Maybe it's killer bees or some kind of chemical spill, Danielle said. Maybe everyone found out except us? Chemicals? Killer bees? Her older sister thought it was stupid. Mom and Dad wouldn't just leave us. Maybe it was the tunnel, said Scott quietly, who was lying motionless. But nobody wanted to think about that. It was too wild an idea. There had to be a better explanation. They just needed to find an adult. After turning on his side, Scott spoke again. The grass doesn't have a smell anymore. Curtis pulled his little brother up off the ground. Then, without a word, the children looked to one another and began moving quickly through the fog toward the building. Once they reached the gate, the group hesitated. They didn't know what to expect, especially when they thought back to the swing set, which was burned into their mind. There was no doubt that something was very, very wrong. Scott's words about the tunnel were beginning to stir. Maybe the answer really was at the playground, but none of them could imagine going back there. With strange thoughts in their brains, they moved through the entrance into the concrete hollow beneath the bleachers. They came to the concession stand where they had been only a short time before. But no one was there. The stand was closed. It looked as though it hadn't been open for years. There was no food, no drink, nothing. Everything was lifeless, empty, dark. Nothing seemed real. It felt like a bad dream. A nearby staircase led outside to the bleachers above. They climbed all the way up to the scorekeeper's lookout room. The windows were broken and dusty. It looked abandoned. It wasn't until the children began to search the lookout tower, scanning the area for signs of life, that they finally saw something out in the field. There, in the distance, were people. People playing baseball? Without any thought or hesitation, Agent called out, "Hey, hey, you down there! Where'd everyone go?" Her voice echoed. Then it was silent. The figures down below stopped. Slowly, they began to turn toward the children. The baseball players were dressed in old, ripped clothing, and their faces were darkened. In the fog, they stood there, quiet. After a long pause, one of them finally called back, "Go home!" A different voice, this one weaker, more gravelly, called out, "You don't belong here. Get out." The children looked to one another. What was happening? Then the person holding the baseball bat let a horrific, blood-curdling shriek. "Go home, fleshheads!" The voice was inhuman. The children watched. The players below slowly began moving toward them. They lumbered closer and began to moan. They moved even faster. And before the children could react, the shadows were running up the bleachers, screaming and shrieking. Suddenly, much closer, they could now see the faces of these things, which were skeletal, disfigured, like the faces of the dead. Aja grabbed her little sister and threw her toward the exit. Without a thought, the four ran themselves running faster, faster, faster than ever before, back to the playground, the way they had come. They rushed down the steps, darted past the concession, toward the exit, beneath the bleachers. All the while, they could hear the pounding footsteps of the ghoulish monsters they had seen only moments before. They were right behind them. They were coming. They were hungry. Out through the gate to the main path, they flew on their feet. Looking back, they saw the terrible beings erupt from the building, carrying baseball bats. They had shark mouths of sharp, bared, triangle teeth, scowling in anger. They had ruined their game. When they reached the trail, the four could see the hill above where they had been playing not long ago. Coming down the slope were two more figures, but these beings wore black hooded cloaks and seemed to glide down the hill. The entities were moving at high speed directly toward them. There was no time to process. The children could do nothing but run back toward the playground, screaming in terror as they tore down the path. The swing was still moving when they reached the playground, but it began to slow down as they approached. The transparent image of a boy wearing a red hoodie suddenly appeared, sitting on the bench, as if he had been there the entire time. The child pulled back his hood and revealed his face. It, too, was the face of death. The boy's eyes were sunken and clouded. His skin was falling right off the bone. He looked at them as though he was the one who was afraid, and then disappeared, like a ghost. The playground was a dead end. They all knew that they wouldn't be able to climb the fence to the subdivision before those evil things reached them. There was nowhere left to run. A strange wind began to blow. Scott suddenly cried out, "We have to get back! Back to the other side! Back to the tunnel! Now!" They somehow knew that he was right. It was their only chance. They made a beeline straight for the tunnel entrance. The baseball players and evil ghosts were right behind them. They could hear the shrieks and screams seconds away from them, right behind them. Into the cement dungeon once again. The children scrambled frantically fast through the sand on hands and knees. They panicked and breathed hard, and their cries reverberated off the concrete as they searched for the new tunnel. And there it was, once again, the same new tunnel. They flew feverishly through the passage, all the while tormented by wails from the evil spirits in pursuit. Lights appeared ahead. Suddenly, the same electricity was felt, and the horrible, evil sounds became muffled and began to stop. It was as though they were waking up from a nightmare, waking up to the sounds of happy children playing all around them. Something was happening. Something had changed. Afraid that they were now being followed, Asia looked back to where the new tunnel had been. It was now only a blank cement wall. Together, they crawled to the exit, shaking and in tears, unsure of what would be waiting for them. The group emerged and got to their feet, then stumbled about in a daze, desperately wondering if they were still in danger. But they were not. Instead, they found themselves back in the park, surrounded by happy children, happy families, on a hot Sunday in July. And there we go. That was Down in the Park. When I first read that, my heart was very, very fast, especially once they arrived in that weird dimension, I guess. Was that even a dimension? I'll do a short review here. I think this was great. I like the concept of the kids entering through a playground tunnel and then coming out into this evil dimension, like this weird place that somehow doesn't exist, but it does. I just think that's really fascinating, because normally you think of a park and you don't think of like this evil twisted dimension, but I think it's really cool that it seems almost like a dream. And when the kids arrive, they try to find their parents and stuff, and it's just like this alternate world, which I think was really cool, a really cool idea. And I like the fact that the spirits, or like the skeletons or whatever they are, the evil monsters, I think they were cool. And they were like described really well. And then when the kids tried to, talk to them, it turns out that they were dead, and they just wanted to eat them, I guess. And I think the best part of this story is like them getting back to the playground, and it's like this super frantic race against time, and you feel like the monsters are gonna get them. But I think it's cool at the end. It turns out that they go back into the tunnel, they go back to their world somehow, and then the entrance to the evil world closes up. And I think that's really cool, because now they're not in danger, they're back down in the park. And I don't know, I think that's a really cool story. And of all the scary stories in this book, I think that is my favorite. I don't know. There's just something about it. I hope you enjoyed my narration. I hope it wasn't awful. I kind of stumbled in a bit. Mostly because I don't really read stories out loud, but at least not on camera. But I hope you enjoyed that. I love this story. I'm going to give it a 10. I have no real complaints. I especially like the happy ending, where it's, just a happy day in July. They're back to their, family, back to their, friends, and back to a happy place. So I think it goes from incredibly dark and disturbing, and then it goes back to happy. So that's cool. Also, I think this is one of the only stories in this book that ends on a happy note, because the other ones are incredibly dark, So I just think that's really cool. And I think it's probably one of the best stories to tell in the summer, because again, it's in July. So I just think that's really cool. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this narration. Hope it wasn't like bad or anything. I think I'll probably review some of my other favorite stories. I'll probably do at least 5 more, just because I really like them. I definitely will do readings of some of the original stories, for sure, because why not? But I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. What scary story is your favorite from this book or from the original trilogy? Or do you have a scary story from another book series that you like? Let me know. And I will see you for the next one. Stay tuned for more horror-themed videos. You know, just Halloween content. I'm gonna try to get as much as I can out. But until then, thanks again. Have a great day. Stay tuned, and I will see you later.